And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, saying, "Come and see."
Noise of Thunder Radio with Christian J. Pinto.
Okay, praise the Lord, you guys, and welcome. I'm Chris Pinto. This is Noise of Thunder Radio. Today on the show, we are going to talk about what is happening in the news, what's going on in our country. We just stumbled upon an interview with Tucker Carlson. Carlson being interviewed by Steve Bannon in the War Room. And this quote came directly from Tucker Carlson. Everybody knows that Tucker Carlson is a very well-known media personality. He was on Fox News for many years and left Fox because of certain disagreements there. And he's being interviewed by Steve Bannon, and they're talking about the whole situation with Israel and Iran and the Trump administration, etc. And here is what Tucker Carlson had to say. Listen to this.
I actually really love Trump. I think he's a deeply humane, kind person. And I am saying this because I'm really afraid that my country's going to be further weakened by this. I think we're going to see the end of American empire. Obviously, other nations would like to see that, and this is a perfect way to scuttle the USS America on the shoals of Iran. But it's also going to end, I believe, Trump's presidency and effectively end it.
All right, so there you just heard Tucker Carlson say that this war now between Israel and Iran, with the United States dragged into it, this is effectively going to, end the American empire. End the American empire. That phrase that we've been talking about that was published by the Jesuits in America magazine after the election of Pope Leo XIV, an American pope for the end of American empire, ? And Tucker Carlson not only believes it's going to be the end of American empire, think of the phrase that he's using. It's a very, very particular phrase. The end of American empire, and also he thinks the end of Trump's presidency. Now, to be fair to Tucker Carlson, we should say he goes on when he fleshes the idea out in the conversation with Bannon. He does say that he believes that the end of Trump's presidency, what he meant by that, or so it seemed, this is my impression of it, is that President Trump will become so entangled in these foreign wars that effectively he won't be able to do a lot of the other things that he wanted to do domestically to help America, to help the United States, because he's going to be entangled with helping Israel defeat Iran, and then also this situation in Ukraine with Russia, etc., that these foreign wars are going to entangle the Trump administration from this time forward. And that will hinder him and his ability to do anything or to do other things that he had wanted to do to help the interests of the American people, so to speak. That seems to be what Tucker Carlson is saying. So it's not as though he's suggesting that Trump will be impeached and thrown out of the White House or something, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. But there's no doubt that what is going on right now with Israel and the bombing of Iran, I mean, this is very, very extreme. I'm sure many of you have watched footage. I was watching some video last night where the Iranian regime, their main television broadcast station was bombed by Israel. And literally there was a female reporter or broadcaster talking to the audience and going on and on and on in Arabic and so on. And this is their main propaganda outlet. And while she's talking, literally, boom, a big explosion happens, a bomb lands on the studio, and suddenly everything comes crumbling down and she has to turn and flee. I mean, that's the situation over there right now. It's a very, very bad situation for Iran and that whole regime. They could end up like Syria, where their leadership has to flee the country. In fact, there were some early reports of the Ayatollah fleeing the country. Whether or not that's actually happened or not, there seems to be no clear agreement. Some have said he's gone into hiding. Now, the thing that's very peculiar about Iran, and those of us who can remember the Jimmy Carter administration, remember what happened with the U.S. embassy hostages there in Iran when they were held hostage during the Ayatollah Khomeini and that whole situation there. If you go and study Iran, I'm sure many of you have done this, but if you haven't done it, you should go study what life was like in Iran before the radical Muslims took over. Iran was looking a lot like a Western country, and all of that changed once the Islamic radicals came in and took over. All right, but I want to stay on this theme of the end of American empire. This phrase actually is a much more common phrase than I thought before when I did the last show. And of course, it's America Magazine, this Jesuit review, and they're saying, Leo the 14th, an American Pope for the end of American empire. That to me was a very strange headline, especially coming from the Jesuit order. But if you go online and just type in end of American empire, you will find that there's a whole series of articles and even books that have been written. Here's one on Substack, Trump's Tariffs and the End of American Empire. Here's a book by Patrick Watts, published in 2024, The End of American Empire. That's the title of the book. Here, I'll just read a couple of different titles. Is This the Fall of the American Empire? This is from a YouTube channel. America is Collapsing Like Rome. Richard Wolff with the Cooper Academy. Have no idea who that is, but there it is. The Sydney Morning Herald has a headline, Is This the Beginning of the End of the American Empire? This 3 weeks ago. These are all relatively recent articles, but there are some that go back several years. The Asia Times, back in 2024, had an article, Where is American Empire's Fall Taking Us All? Declassified UK, that's the name of the website, quote, The Impending Collapse of the American Empire. Then the East Asia Forum, they've got an article, Trump Act 2 spells the end of the American empire. So over and over and over again, we have articles and books and this kind of thing talking about the end of the American empire. Now, as if this were not enough, now I'm going to play some audio from a video presentation that was put together by someone. I still don't know who put it together, but it showed up in our Facebook feed, so I am going to play part of it, and I'm just going to play the parts that have to do with this End American Empire theme. But this is an ongoing theme of the radical Palestinian movement, the Palestinian Muslim movement operating here in the United States. Very important to remember, this is a movement that Steve Emerson talked about all the way back in the 90s in the documentary Jihad in America, that they were in states like New Jersey and elsewhere, and these radical Palestinians that want some kind of a civil war here in our country. But I'm going to play some of the audio so you can hear this recurring theme about the end of American empire. That's the phrase that they use. Here it is. Listen.
In May 2024, over 100 organizations gathered for the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit, Michigan. More than 3,000 activists were in attendance, Speakers celebrated the October 7th massacre, called for resistance against the West, and mapped out a vision for the destruction of America from within.
The Palestinians who came to the United States understood their role immediately upon arrival.
We, the movement for Palestine in North America and across the world, are here to fight until victory.
On October 7th, Hamas declared war on Israel. On October 8th, their supporters declared war on America.
It is time to smash this empire!
The goal of the movement is not just to destroy Israel. Their primary target is the U.S. They call America the enemy, the beast, or simply empire.
We're in the belly of the beast. We're in the heart of U.S. empire.
Here in North America, in the U.S., the belly of the beast, the heart of empire.
We have to bring down this empire with 1 million cuts.
We will be hitting empire where it hurts most. Bring empire to its knees.
Dismantling the heart of empire is not easy, and it won't be rapid. But we know it's possible.
This panel, y'all, is talking about what is next. To strike at the heart of empire.
The Palestinian American pro-terror movement uses the word resistance as a euphemism for violence.
They're not terrorists, they're freedom fighters.
Our noble, steadfast resistance.
We have made the situation untenable for the empire's ruling classes and the political establishment.
Okay, so that gives you a gist of what this video is about. The video is about 8 minutes long or so, and it was put together by somebody who has been tracking this radical Palestinian movement and all of their declarations about ending empire and the end of empire and America is the beast and all this other kind of stuff, and they need to bring it down, etc. It is, there's no question, a radical left-wing movement that is associated with the Jesuit order, not directly, but covertly, mainly because the Jesuits are the authors of social justice. They're the co-authors of socialism and communism. We document all of that for you in our film, American Jesuits. We show the progression back in the 19th century. And let's remember, you have some pastors, ministers, historians like J.A. Wiley, who directly said in 1881, Wiley said that the Jesuits use communism as a weapon against countries they are trying to control. Then you have the Islamic element. Rome has been promoting Islam since Vatican Council II. And the Jesuits we talked about during the Biden administration built a mosque at Georgetown University. Their connection with Islam is undeniable. But this is where the red-green axis comes into play. I think Rome is a key hub, if you will, for the red-green axis. But of course, it goes all over Europe and into different parts of the world, and it's right here in the United States. Now, something to remember, if you watch our film, American Jesuits, we have a whole section on World War II. Part of that section covers the Ustashi in Croatia under a guy named Ante Pavelic, who was kind of a puppet dictator set up by Hitler during the war. And their purpose was to persecute the Serbian Christian population primarily. They also persecuted Jews and gypsies as well, but the main focus was the Orthodox Serbs, who were horribly mistreated by the Ustashi. Well, the Ustashi were made up of radical Catholic socialists and Muslims. That was the Ustashi. And in fact, if you research this whole thing, there are those who argue that the war in Bosnia that happened during the Clinton administration, that was a later manifestation of the Ustashi, although most of the Western media won't report it that way, but the people who know the history do report it that way. In fact, let me give you a quote from the Jewish Press. You can find this article on jewishpress.com, and the article is called The Holocaust's Most Vicious Killers by Edwin Black. The Holocaust's Most Vicious Killers. Bear in mind, even the Jewish people who typically focus on, the Holocaust and how the Jews were horribly treated by the Nazis, etc. But even they admit the Ustashi were the absolute worst. And the reason is because the evidence is overwhelming. But here's a quote from this article. Here's how the Ustashi are described. They say, quote, "The Ustasha of Yugoslavia was a Muslim Catholic alliance of Nazi killers so beastly that even Nazi officials in Berlin were horrified. The Ustasha and 3 related crack divisions of Arab Nazi Waffen-SS comprised tens of thousands of Muslim volunteers and terrorized people of all faiths in Yugoslavia." End quote. So when you see here in the United States, you see Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, AOC, and all of the other Catholic socialists with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and all of these Muslim Palestinians, you are seeing effectively an Americanized version of the Ustashi. And once you realize how vicious and how cruel the Ustashi were, you can totally see why these same people who are effectively a later generation of the same mentality, why they would celebrate something like October 7th and what happened, the terrible tragedy that happened there in Israel. But as the Bible warns us, the wicked shall do wickedly, that evildoers and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. All right, let's go to our commercial break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about the Trump administration now having bombed Iran. And in response, there is a Georgetown University professor that has said now that he hopes Iran will get nuclear bombs and be able to respond. We're going to talk about that when we come back right after this.
Adullam Films presents a stunning new documentary, The True Christian History of America, exploring the Bible-based Christian origins of the early American view of freedom, tracing the principles of liberty back to England and the Great Reformation. For many years, our schools have taught that the founding of our republic was from the Deists, or the Enlightenment in France. But is that truly the case? Did the Enlightenment first declare no taxation without representation, or trial by jury? Were they the champions of freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right to bear arms? And why did Samuel Adams declare that the reign of political Protestantism would commence just before signing the Declaration of Independence? Filmed on location in both the United States and Europe, The True Christian History of America is now available at adullamfilms.com. That's adullamfilms.com. Now available at noiseofthunderradio.com. That's noiseofthunderradio.com.
Adullam Films presents an exciting new documentary, Bridge to Babylon, Part 3 in an award-winning series on the untold history of the Bible. Dr. Jack Moorman calls it a masterful presentation of what is the single most important issue facing Christians today, the defense of the Bible as the Word of God. Why was the Bible changed in 1881? Why have so many churches abandoned biblical inerrancy? And what direction are scholars taking the Scriptures today? Learn the truth in Bridge to Babylon, the sequel to A Lamp in the Dark and Tares Among the Wheat. Bridge to Babylon is now available at noiseofthunderradio.com. That's noiseofthunderradio.com.
Noise of Thunder Radio.
Okay, we are back. Praise the Lord, you guys. I'm Chris Pinto. This is Noise of Thunder Radio. Today on the show, we are talking about what's going on in the news. We're talking about this whole idea of the end of American empire. This is a common phrase that has been employed by a number of different groups. Tucker Carlson suggested, we played his audio earlier, that this conflict between Israel and Iran, and now with the United States joining in, that this will be the end of American empire. Somehow or other going to lead to the end of American empire. Although there does seem to be a whole collection of different things going on with these mobs that were in Los Angeles, turning California upside down. That whole situation it may not be making the headlines right now, but the situation is far from over because the powers south of our border have been planning this for more than 100 years now. They're not likely to give up on it anytime soon. Now we have, in response to the recent attack on Iran, really on their nuclear factories where they're trying to create a nuclear bomb, that's what the Trump administration targeted, rightly so. In response to that, we have Georgetown University professor Jonathan Brown, who we've heard of before, we've talked about before, where Professor Brown has taught for years that slavery and rape are acceptable because they were practiced by the Prophet Muhammad. Well, now he's made comments to the effect that he hopes that in response, well, here, let me read the headline. This is on Breitbart News. The headline says, quote, Georgetown professor hopes Iran gets a bomb after U.S. airstrike. It says, quote, Jonathan A.C. Brown, professor of Islamic civilization at Georgetown University, expressed hope for Iran to develop a bomb after the United States dealt significant damage to its nuclear program. Now, it should be very interesting to see how the Jesuits respond to this, whether or not they are going to get rid of Professor Brown, or if he's going to be allowed to continue, just like he was after he made his controversial comments years ago about Islam and slavery. If history repeats itself, then they're not likely going to let him go because they know he is a part of what they are hoping will be the future of their plans to subvert America. Islam is a weapon that they have been sharpening and fashioning for decades now in our country, really, and throughout the Western world. I believe this goes back to the very end of World War II. I believe that the Jesuits planned the advance of Islam all the way back at least to Vatican Council II, because for the first time in history, they declare that the God of the Muslims is the same as the God of Christianity. And that is rank heresy according to anybody's interpretation of theology prior to the end of World War II. Meaning whether you were Catholic, Protestant, Greek, Russian, Orthodox, it didn't matter. Everybody would have agreed that it's heresy to say that Allah, the moon god, who declares that God has no son, that denies that Jesus is the Son of God, to say that Allah, therefore, is the same as the God of the Bible, is a form of blasphemy, because you are attributing to the moon god the glory that rightly belongs only to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's the same as when the children of Israel, some of them built the golden calf, and they said, this golden calf, this is the God who brought us out of Egypt, and he's the God who's going to bring us back again. It's the same thing. It's counterfeiting God, but it is a form of contempt and blasphemy against God. It's actually a capital crime. Biblically, wherever this happens, like with the golden calf worshipers are put to death by Moses and the followers of the Lord. They're executed. Same thing happens to the Syrians when the Syrians lost a battle against King Ahab, who was king of Israel at the time, and they said, well, their God is the God of the hills and not the God of the valleys. And so God says, well, because they have said God is God of the hills and not the God of the valleys, therefore he's going to deliver the entire Syrian army into their hands, and they kill 100,000 of them. It was a form of blasphemy to try and reduce God, because the pagan gods are territorial. The pagan, you have the God of the hills, God of the valley, God of the ocean, the God of wine, and all these other pagan gods that have different territories. And so to try and reduce God, who is the creator of the heavens and the earth and all that is in them, to the level of one of these pagan deities was considered a form of blasphemy, capital blasphemy. So they were put to death. You have a similar situation with the Rabshakeh and the king of Assyria in Isaiah chapter 37, where the Rabshakeh, who's really the mouthpiece for the king of Assyria, basically threatens ancient Israel and says that the gods of the other nations have not been able to protect them from the king of Assyria. And he says, well, your God is not going to be able to protect you either. And God's response to that is, whom hast thou blasphemed? Even the Holy One of Israel. It's, again, blasphemy to suggest that God, the God of the Bible, is somehow or other equal to the pagan gods of the nations. No, God is not equal to any of these idols. God says, I am the Lord, that is my name, and my glory I will not give to another, nor my praise to carved images. So, the God of the Bible, the God of Christianity, is not somehow the same as or equal to the false god of Islam. The moon god of Islam is a false god. It is a demonic deity. And we have to maintain that, because there are more and more efforts continually, brothers and sisters, to try and conflate Islam with Christianity. That's an ongoing movement. And this, if you're not familiar with it, you should be. The American Red Cross now has joined up with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. Remember, the Red Cross is a subversive organization. Do not trust the American Red Cross. I wouldn't give them a penny. I wouldn't give them anything. They were responsible for smuggling Nazi war criminals out of Europe after the war. We talk about this briefly in American Jesuits, but anybody can look this up. It's well known. And the American Red Cross is involved in smuggling thousands, possibly millions of illegal aliens into the United States. Well, they've joined up, because I believe the Red Cross is controlled by Rome, and they've joined up with the Muslims now, and they have the Red Crescent. And why would the Muslims have the Red Crescent? My ability to prove this is very limited, I admit it, but you have to think, why would they do it? Most likely so they can use the Red Crescent working as part of a network with the Red Cross to smuggle Islamic immigrants into Western Europe and probably into the United States as well, and in different parts of the world, because that is the cover of philanthropy and humanitarianism, a cloak of deception that Rome has employed for centuries. Now, this also reminds me of a story that I was told when I was giving my presentations on American Jesuits at the Prophecy Watchers Conference down in Florida earlier this year. And there was a guy who came up to me afterwards, and he was a veteran, and he had been deployed to, I want to say it was either Afghanistan or Iraq. Can't remember which one. And he was sent with a group of his fellow military guys to meet with Islamic leaders in a certain town. And he went to meet with them, And the Islamic leader walked over and said to him, "Are you Catholic? Are you Catholic?" And the guy said, yes, I'm Catholic. That's what he said. Now, he wasn't really Catholic. He was a Protestant. He was an evangelical, but he figured that what the guy meant was, "Are you a Christian?" That's what he thought. But the guy specifically said to him, "Are you Catholic?" And so he played along and he said, yes, I'm Catholic. And he says, "Okay, I'll deal with you." He says, "I won't deal with anyone who's not a Catholic." All right. And he said he thought about that. He wasn't sure what to think of it. He didn't know what to make of it. But then he saw my presentation on the Jesuits and their involvement in things. And of course, they built the mosque at Georgetown University. They have a very, very close relationship with Islam. Very close. And he said this made him think about that moment when he met the guy, the Muslim guy, who only wanted to talk to a Catholic. There's no question there is an alliance between Rome and Islam. There's no question about that. And very, very important to remember it because it has everything to do with what is going on in Western civilization. The Vatican, I believe, is directly responsible for the mass importation of Muslims into the Western world. And once you understand that, and you understand it goes back to World War II, you realize it's not just something that's happening. It's not because the leaders have all lost their minds and they decided to import millions of Muslims. No, this is part of a greater agenda. And yes, people complaining and lifting up a shout and so on is important, but that by itself is not going to change things. It's only going to change when the leaders are somehow held accountable. How that's going to happen remains to be seen. Many people are hopeful that the Trump administration will take action at some level. I'm not sure what's going to happen in Western Europe. They may be brought to the point of civil war. And the important thing to remember about civil war, whether it happens somewhere in Europe or it happens here in our country or anywhere else, the globalists don't mind a civil war. And sometimes you'll hear people say that they want a civil war to happen. But what the Jesuits want is they don't really care who wins the war. What they care about is the peace treaty that is negotiated at the end of the war. That's what matters. The peace treaty. Because they'll have people fighting on both sides. So they don't care. What they care about is the peace treaty. Because it's through the peace treaty, when they bring it all to an end, that's what matters. The fighting and the killing doesn't matter. The purpose of war is to ultimately achieve a goal. So this is why you had in Rhodesia, they had the Bush War, the Rhodesians, the whites, they won all the battles, but it didn't matter because when the peace treaty was made, the country was signed over to Mugabe and the communists. So it didn't matter that they had lost all the battles. What mattered was that peace treaty. And the same thing happened in South Africa. The South African army, they won all the battles, but it didn't matter. Ultimately, there was a Jesuit feeding communion to Nelson Mandela in prison. What mattered was that peace treaty, because that's what ultimately gave Mandela control over the country. The fighting doesn't matter. It's the peace treaty. That's what matters. Now, I'm not saying fighting doesn't matter at all. Don't get me wrong. But let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to read you part of the Jesuit oath. The Jesuit oath, if you've seen American Jesuits, you know that we show part of the oath in the film, and we have actors and dramatization and so on. We show part of the oath in A Lamp in the Dark, The Untold History of the Bible. But we've got new actors and a whole new setup and all that for American Jesuits. But let me read this to you. This is from the book The Engineer Corps of Hell, or Rome's Sappers and Miners, by Edwin Sherman. published back in 1883, and he publishes what is thought to be the complete oath. And so in part of the oath, here's what you have. You have the superior Jesuit who is initiating a younger Jesuit into the oath, what they call the fourth vow of the order. All the priests take 3 vows. The Jesuits have this special fourth vow, which is a secret, which is admitted that it's a secret. Okay? This is supposedly the oath. Modern Jesuits deny that this is the oath, so we're just going to say that. But many of us believe that it is the true oath, and here's part of the reason why. So here's what the superior says to the initiate. He starts out by saying, quote, "My son, heretofore you have been taught to act the dissembler among Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, and to be a spy even among your own brethren, to believe no man, to trust no man, among the reformers to be a reformer, among the Huguenots to be a Huguenot, among the Calvinists to be a Calvinist, among the Protestants generally to be a Protestant, and obtaining their confidence to seek even to preach from their pulpits, and to denounce with all the vehemence in your nature our holy religion and the Pope," etc. And then it goes on. So showing that Jesuits are operating in a secretive manner as double agents, spies, infiltrating all the different churches and various denominations. But this has been said now by a variety of different sources. You find J.A. Wiley writing about this. Even John Adams says words to this effect in terms of the many disguises of the members of the order. But here's the next part. It says the oath now. Quote, "You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces, and states that were at peace, and to incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences, and enjoying the blessings of peace. To take sides with the combatants and to act secretly in concert with your brother Jesuit, who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that which you might be connected, only that the church might be the gainer in the end in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means." So what the oath is revealing is that, yes, Jesuits are going to have people on both sides of the conflict, openly opposed to each other, only that the church, meaning the Church of Rome, might be the gainer in the end in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace. That's what they want, the conditions that are determined in the treaties. So that's why they're going to have, the Jesuits, let's just say in Rhodesia, they would have had people working for Ian Smith on one side and people working for Mugabe on the other side, on both sides. And it doesn't really matter who's fighting and winning or whatever, or we'll say that that's of minor importance. The real importance is going to be what happens when people sit down at the table and they sign a treaty, a peace treaty. What are the terms of peace? Because war is a means to an end. So if that happens, brothers and sisters, in our country, if we are brought to a point of civil war somewhere here in the future, if that happens, that's the thing to look for. Don't buy into the idea that because somebody's winning all the battles, whoever they are, that means that they're necessarily going to come out on top of things when it's all over. It's because what happens, here's what happens. What happens is these civil wars begin just like they're happening right now. They begin, people are fighting, they're going back and forth, people are being killed, they're dying, etc. And then you have the people who come in and they say, oh, we've just got to stop all of this fighting and people are dying and oh, we have to put a stop to it and it's horrible. And of course, that makes sense to everybody, right? So what do we need to do? We need to go sit down at the table and have a peace talk. That's the key. And in that peace talk, you're going to have people saying, well, you have to give this and we want that and et cetera and so on, back and forth. And quite often what happened in Rhodesia and South Africa, in their peace talks, they gave away their countries. They basically gave away their country through the peace talks. Even though they were winning the fight, they had to give away their country in order to establish peace. And if we end up in a civil war, that's going to be what the globalist Jesuit powers will be looking for. They will be looking for the opportunity to swoop in and get Americans to sign over some, half, maybe all the country. Who knows? That's why things like when you see the Reconquista, the Mexican guy, the politician down there holding up the map from 1830 showing California and Texas as part of Mexico. If we have a civil war, you watch, you're going to have people who are going to be arguing that the peace treaty in the war needs to go and give Mexico the state of Texas or California or something. That'll be what they argue for. Okay? That'll be what they argue for, or something similar. It's why we have to pay attention to these things, because this is how countries are overthrown. And it's happened throughout the 20th century. It's been happening in one country after another for the last 100 years. See, I believe this is a fulfillment of what Dostoevsky warned about, the great Russian writer. And here's the quote from him where he says, quote, "The Jesuits are simply the Romish army for the earthly sovereignty of the world in the future. With the pontiff of Rome for emperor, that's their ideal. It's simple lust of power, of filthy earthly gain, of domination. Something like a universal serfdom with them as masters. That's all they stand for." Fyodor Dostoevsky. Earthly sovereignty of the world in the future. Think about that. Universal serfdom. This is what World Economic Forum is pushing. Another quote from Dostoevsky, he said, quote, "Catholicism sold Christ when it blessed the Jesuits." You see, the Jesuits are responsible for bringing in this total disregard for the gospel. And the doctrine of Loyola, which is, if we tell you that black is white and white is black, you must believe it. In other words, mindless obedience to the papacy and the hierarchy. Mindless obedience. Don't stop thinking. No thinking. Just do what we tell you to do. Obviously, there are many Catholics who don't agree with that, but many others do. And that's unfortunate. It's completely contrary to the teaching of Christ. Jesus said, "Take heed that no man deceive you." Take heed that no man deceive you. For many will come in my name, saying, "I am Christ," and shall deceive many. So nobody can accept leadership from any man upon the earth or collection of men that requires blind, unthinking obedience, slavish obedience to a person other than God. God himself is the only person that we give our absolute obedience to. All right, on the next program, I think I'm going to talk about the U.S. support for the state of Israel. I hear a lot of people complaining about that. Should our government be sending financial aid to modern Israel? I think the Bible speaks to that. I really do. And I'm going to go over it on the next program. I'll give you my take anyway. All right, brethren, that's going to do it for us today. That is our show. We'll stop it there, but we will be back next time as the Lord leads us. Until then, God bless you guys. I'm Chris Pinto, and you've been listening to Noise of Thunder Radio.